Welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all kinds of things. Transportation. I am the traffic anchor and transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber. And with me today, the lovely, the talented anchor reporter, Nicole Brady. Hello, Nicole.
Hi.
Via Zoom.
We're on Zoom. Sometimes I forget people still can't see us, though.
Yeah, no, they cannot see us.
This is still an audio podcast.
Yes. It is, and so I'm using my
but
little.
I can see you, which is nice.
Well, see, yeah, we can see each other, which helps with the flow of the program here. It is, and so I'm using my
but
little.
I can see you, which is nice.
Well, see, yeah, we can see each other, which helps with the flow of the program here. And I'm using my little mixer here that plugs into the phone that has you on Zoom, and then that's how everybody can hear you. So, yeah, I mean, it's Zoom audio, which isn't the greatest, but, you know, it's better than using other methods of communication. Like a tin can and string. It is.
There you go. We've come so far.
It was, see, the reason I'm having you on the show today is because it was early this morning. I checked my email and I saw a note from Joseph that said he was going to go to the zoo and he's not doing the show. So I'm like, okay. Fine. I'm like, okay, fine. You couldn't have told me that a couple of days ago. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, really, you're gonna just tell me overnight in the morning. Perfect.
Wow. So I assume that means he's off of work today, I guess. Too.
Well, no, he works in the afternoon, so he can go to the zoo in the morning. And then do whatever he's doing at the zoo. Enjoy the giraffes and the rhinos and the wildebeests.
Couldn't he have done the podcast from the zoo?
Oh, of course he could, but he's not. No, he's not going to do that.
Brought you the flavor and the color of pandemic zoo.
He did the recording a couple weeks ago, driving to drop his dog off at doggy daycare. So yeah, he could have, but he doesn't care. And you do. You do
That's
care.
Right.
You care.
I do care. I'm sitting in my bed right now.
Well, hello.
So
this is a family-friendly program, Nicole.
No, this is where this is the secret behind the scenes. I do everything from my bed now. and I really want to know how many people are doing the same, working from home. I don't have a desk in this house. I have my kitchen table.
You don't? You don't have like a basement with a desk?
No, I could probably set something up, but I don't know. My husband has an office, and we moved a couple of months or less than 2 months ago. So we haven't really reset things up. But I'm in the guest room that's kind of like my room, basically. Well, yeah, we don't have to get into my whole personal life, but because of this weird shift, I sleep in the guest room on and use that bed and everything. So now, so I was thinking maybe of putting a desk in here at some point. But no, every morning I get up, I write from this bed. I do interviews from this bed.
Very nice.
I do podcasts from the bed.
Perfect. It's the bed of everything. You know, IKEA has tables and chairs that are, and you probably can go to a thrift store and probably pick up something pretty cheap.
I'm sure I can. I heard IKEA was open again, too. I've been meaning to see what that looks like now.
Run over to the ARC store or Goodwill, and I'm sure you could pick up something right there. Coming up in just a bit, I'm going to have a conversation with Rocky Moretti. Rocky is the Director of Policy and Research for TRIP, T-R-I-P. And we talked about the state of our roads, our infrastructure around the country, and what we can do to improve it. TRIP, by the way, is a private nonprofit organization, and they report on surface transportation issues. And obviously, the infrastructure is a issue on the mind of many travelers, and so I'll have that conversation coming up in just a little bit. Also on the mind of travelers is getting sick on an airplane. And are you scared of flying? Have you flown since COVID? No?
No, I'm not overly scared. We're just not going anywhere.
Well,
the flying part, it's the not going anywhere part.
There are people who are scared. In fact, I saw a thing from former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, who said that he would not get on an airplane. He is actually saying, don't get on airplanes right now because you're gonna get the virus. And if you're scared of flying right now, and you think you might get the COVID from flying, well, there's a Mideast airline. You've probably seen their commercials. It's called Emirates. They have the fancy planes with the fancy seating ability. They're out of Dubai. And they have a new strategy for getting people back on board their planes. But it's a little unconventional. Just a little bit. So they say if one of the passengers there on one of their flights is diagnosed with COVID-19, during their journey, the airline will cover their medical expenses up to 150,000 euros, which is about $176,000. They will also pay 100 euros, about $118 per day, for quarantine costs, such as a hotel room for up to 2 weeks if they need to be quarantined. And if the worst happens, Emirates will offer up about 1,500 euros or $1,700 for your funeral. Yeah.
Oh.
So if the airline kills you with COVID, they will at least cover $1,700 of your burial.
Oh, they're really going cheap on the funeral part.
I know.
The rest of great.
They must be just putting you in a cardboard box and sending you through the crematorium, because that's not some kind of fancy casket with a hole in the ground. No.
Oh. Well, hey, that's more than a lot of places will do right now, I guess. And I know our airlines are full some days, are pretty packed flights still, and then other days light. But I don't know. I guess you just have as much a chance of getting it in there as you would spending a few hours in any other place.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that they won't cover the cost of testing, but if you die, they will cover that cost. And you have to contact the airline to get your expenses approved before they pay for anything. So I think proving that you picked up the virus on one of their flights is probably going to be the fight of all fights, to prove that you got it from them. So then they would pay for all of your medical expenses, your quarantine, and of course your funeral.
Yeah, so you would have to prove it.
Well, of course, you can't just say, hey, guess what? I got sick and I need I need to be quarantined here in Spain for the next couple of weeks, and you're going to pay for my hotel room.
I have read various articles that have said, a large number of people in certain studies don't have any idea where they got the virus. So, which makes the contact tracing difficult, and just goes to show how that person most likely got it from someone who was asymptomatic then.
Right.
In a place where someone had it in there. And there'd be no way to prove necessarily, I guess, that was it. But no, we're not going anywhere right now because no one will have us as Americans.
America will have you, Nicole. You can go to other places in America. You just can't go.
We could go to.
You just can't go to Italy.
There's a lot of. How many states are quarantining you right now, though? Too. So I don't know.
You could go to Croatia. They'll have you.
I am part Croatian, so I would love to.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so I didn't know that was one of the places still okay.
Do you speak any Croatian?
I don't. My grandma did. No, my mom is. Her parents are both. So my mom's full Croatian and I'm half. But no, I know some food and recipes, and that's about it.
Well, perfect. Also, according to the International Air Transport Association, global air travel is recovering slower than they expected, and they predict it will take until 2024 to return to any pre-pandemic levels.
Wow.
They are seeing a rebound from the lowest point of the shutdown back in April or so. But the bad news, they say, is that the increase is barely visible, as air traffic is still down 86% in June. That's from June of last year. And also compared to a drop of 94% from April of this year to April of last year. That is unbelievable. Wow. Still down 86% for international travel. And because travel, really, it's not being seeked out by average people yet. I think a lot of companies are struggling, and they have slashed, if not just cut altogether, their travel budgets. And so we're not going to see. And exactly. So, and the airlines are still struggling to fill the seats. with enough people to make money, because some are still keeping the center seat open, like Southwest. Planes on average are only about 60 or so % full on flights around the world. And that's well below what airlines need to make money. And for international travel, they're only about 40% full. And I saw a report that business travel could be down and stay down by 50% of what it used to be after everything is over, after we all have a vaccine, after everybody is healthy and everything's open again, that businesses might still, even well after that, still keep travel to a minimum, because right now everybody's doing fine with the Zoom. And they can save a lot of money doing that. And I think there is some businesses that really, I don't know, they know that there's a benefit to collaboration in person. We've seen that with our business, but I think a lot of businesses are going to just save the cost, save the expense, and save the hassle of trying to travel in a post-COVID world and not go anywhere for a long time.
That would seem like one of the last areas to come back, possibly. I did read an article. The Wall Street Journal had an article this week about the holes and the cracks in working from home starting to show. And they said, it may not be the permanent thing that everyone has said, oh, look how great it is. People don't have to commute and companies can save money on the office space and perhaps travel in the future. And there's lots of benefits and maybe some flexibility will stay. But the article talked about how a lot of Silicon Valley companies, especially, they're trying to do these projects that 5 engineers might usually be in one room working on together. And they're trying to do it on Zoom. And they said it's just taking way too long.
Yeah.
To finish anything and everything is disjointed and in our company feels that way too at times. It feels like, wow, how different would this be if we could just all sit in one place and talk about.
And with the business traveler not traveling as much, they really subsidize hotels and they subsidize flights, and really for the rest of us budget travelers, because the airlines can overcharge them and the hotels can overcharge them for their business travel needs because the business is paying for it. So for the most part, those people don't care. So, I mean, obviously the businesses eventually care, but it's not as important to them as it is to you and me. And so
that's a good point.
And so it's going to cost us more when we're going to go get a hotel room or try to book a flight, even though Frontier is having this ridiculous $11 sale right now for the next, 24 hours of what it is. But I think it will be affecting also, with fewer business travelers, all the subset of jobs that rely on the business traveler, the folks that are in the airports, working in the airports and in the taxis and in the shuttles and all those little businesses that cater to business travelers. That's just, it's just going to maybe dry up or go away completely, or at least consolidate, because there's going to be fewer people and fewer business travelers out there. So this obviously is all going to be changing and I'll be a different post-COVID world. We'll see how it goes, I guess.
Right. Yeah. But that is, I hadn't thought much about the airport businesses, and that's obviously they're taking a huge hit. But I haven't been out to the airport since this started for a news story or for travel. So. Yeah,
well, it's changing out there at our airport a lot. To see all the different changes out there. And also it's changing for the cruise line industry, because they still in the United States are pushed back another month before we can see any sailings here. But the first major cruise ship to sail in months actually departed this past weekend, and passengers on board have provided the world with a glimpse of what it could be like for us traveling post-COVID. It was this past Friday that the Mein Schiff 2 departed from Hamburg in Germany for a 3-night sailing up to Norway. Now, the ship it just sailed around or outside of Norway, right there next to Norway, but didn't stop at any of the ports. So it was just went from Hamburg out into the ocean around Norway and then came back. And they're sailing right now at a reduced capacity of about 60%, something likely to happen on the ships in the United States. because the top executives from each of the cruise lines, like Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, Carnival, they've all said that they will start sending out ships when they do send them out at a reduced capacity. Now, some of the passengers on this cruise line, this cruise ship that went out, they said they waited a little bit longer than expected for service in the dining room, but they said it wasn't that big of a deal. And the ship largely has moved now to contactless ordering systems. So rather than having the traditional menu and having the waiter and the waiter assistant there hanging out there at your table, you actually get one of those papers with the QR code on it, and you scan it with your smartphone, and that's where your menu is. You've seen that at restaurants all around here, too. You've seen that where you're ordering, it's that contactless ordering, or some restaurants will have the just the paper ones where they'll collect it and then throw it out. But it's cheaper for them to use the QR codes, obviously, and have you do it on your phone. And there's been a lot of talk about the buffets. It was funny. I was looking at some of this. I came across a box. Gina was trying to find some of our old wedding pictures. One of somebody that was of her family side has died recently, and so she was looking for a picture that she thought was in our wedding photos. And so I was looking through one of the boxes, and I came across a box of our first cruise, and it was on a Royal Caribbean ship, and we had a porthole room. Ever since then, we've gotten a balcony room, but we had a porthole room, and it was just a little cruise that went from Miami to Key West, Bahamas, and then back to the Miami. And there was a midnight buffet. That was the big thing, the midnight buffet. And I have pictures of the midnight. I had to get pictures of the midnight buffet. And it's right there on the deck, right by the pool. And they had the tables out, and they had the ice sculptures, and they had the whole 9 yards. And nobody, they don't do that anymore. But it was one of those extravagances of the cruising, like 20 years ago, right? Well, a lot of people like the buffets. The buffets are great. And they are still open right now. At least on this cruise, it was still open. But they don't have self-service. So they have the staff members putting the stuff on the plate and then handing you the plate. And that's how they're doing it. And it does slow things down a bit. But and most people, they said, are happy with the process. But I like picking out which food I want and how much I want. I don't want to have some Yahoo doing that for me.
No. That Yahoo doesn't get it right.
No, they never get it. They don't know what kind of bacon I like. I like the crispier bacon, not the softer bacon.
I like the softer bacon.
Oh, you do?
So, yes.
And then if I'm getting any of the granola, sometimes I like having the yogurt with the granola and the other stuff, but I like to have a good mix of things. And I like to mix it my own, not to have some Yahoo mixing it for me.
Yeah, well, no, that is the point of the buffet.
Yes.
I'm surprised it's coming back. I've heard those are pretty much done as a concept, even in post-COVID. I don't know. I try to avoid it anyway. It just isn't a healthy way.
So who cares about healthy? It's a buffet. You eat as much as you can eat, Nicole. I know you are slender and you're fit. I though, however, am not.
Well, I still have overindulged at a buffet here and there in my life. I've been to the Vegas ones a few times.
Oh yeah, those are great.
And the all you can eat lobster in Orlando.
Oh sure.
Which really that was a buffet, but no, we didn't go to the buffet. We just sat there at the table and waited for them to bring us more lobster.
Like at the Brazilian steakhouse where you just have to flip over.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Very similar.
Yeah. Well, each morning, every passenger on this cruise ship had to have their temperature checked, and they had the thermal scans. These stations are located around the ship, which looks a lot like a smartphone on a stand. And then the temperature taking process is a lot like a selfie, apparently. So everybody gets their temperature taken to make sure that nobody has a fever. And without a doubt, the biggest question the cruisers have been asking is whether or not they have to wear a mask in public places when they are on the cruise ship. Well, that answer, accordingly, after watching people on this cruise, is yes and no. So all the crew members wear a mask, and the guests are asked to wear them in certain situations where they can't maintain that social distancing, like if they're in a bar or they're in a restaurant where they're really close, if they might be closely seated with other people, but then they have to take it off to eat, or if they're in the hallways, because the hallways are pretty narrow, and so they have to wear them in the hallways if they're going to be running up against another guest or maybe some of the crew members anyway. But most of the tables have been moved farther apart to encourage the social distancing thing. And also the elevators. They only allow 4 guests in the elevator at any one time, and they have these markings on the floor divided, so it's basically 4 square. So everybody has their own square. They don't give you the little red soft square. Yeah, they don't give you the red ball to play 4 square in the elevator, which they should. But that's how they are separating people in the elevator. And now that the ship is sailing at reduced capacity, it actually allows them to clean up the staterooms on a rotational basis. So they'll have a bunch of staterooms open, and usually they're using most of the outside cabins, so they have fresh outside air that they can circulate. They'll deep clean one cabin and use that for the next sailing, and then after these people get out of that cabin, then they'll deep clean that one during the next cruise. So yeah, and they're only let's see, the gym is only allowing 20 people at a time, first come first served basis. Only 10 kids are allowed in the child care program at any given time, and their toys and equipment are all sanitized throughout the day. So there's that, and they say they're going to have more ships sailing out of Germany next month. So there you go. The cruising has already started.
Cruising's bad. I hope it works. Anything anyone tries right now, I just hope it works, because I'd like to see things normalize, but I just can't even imagine the people who are, that's the first thing, get me back on a cruise. Is that what, you love cruises?
I love cruises. I think I might wait a little while to get back on a cruise ship, but one of the best cruises I've ever taken was last January for my 50th, when we were on the Symphony of the Seas, which is the world's largest cruise ship at the current moment, or it was at the time. And it was one of the most spectacular trips I've ever been on. It was great. But that was also pre-COVID, so it was very entertainment.
Normal.
Very normal. And it was great.
Yeah. So, that's the thing. I do wonder about is it worth it at some of these places right now? Now, I did see Disney World. I checked to see what that situation looked like, and it looked pretty amazing. There are no lines.
Right.
I mean, people are saying you're just running through the little turnstile.
But you're touching everything. So you get on the ride. So you're on the ride there with what was it, Peter Pan, and you're flying through this thing. So you're holding on to the ride, or you're getting into the Small World boat, right? And you're still touching everything that everybody else has touched, right? They're not sanitizing each of those little boats before you get back on the Small World.
If you do the sanitizer, that shouldn't really be a huge problem. If there's not people around you in crowds and breathing on you. Now, I don't know how many are going in the rides. If you're on a Peter Pan boat, do they skip one boat between each people?
Yeah, I don't know. Each
party, and each group. Because then I mean, again, I wouldn't do it right now. It's a lot. But if I lived in Orlando right now, I think I might want to test that
because
out.
On Space Mountain, if the first person in the first car there at Space Mountain barfs, it's going to get you on the back in the back.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be doing those.
And it's going to be the same as if they were spitting or yelling or screaming or whatever. The droplets are coming out.
Yeah, no scream rights right now.
Well, before we get to the interview, I saw a report that shows we are holding onto our cars longer than ever before. And now the average age of a vehicle in the United States is just shy of 12 years. And that's a new record. They say that this trend is really creating opportunities, though, for repair shops and part sellers, because older vehicles, they need to be maintained more than a newer car, and that new vehicle sales are down about 6 to 10% from last year. So there are more older cars on the road, and also the resale of older cars is going to be picking up as well. And I also think that vehicles that have been built in the last 5 to 10 years are actually built better overall than they were long ago, back in the 90s and 80s and 70s. They really weren't built to last like they are now. And as long as you maintain them, you go get the oil changed every 5,000 miles. As long as you get the regular service done every so often as it's recommended by the factory, these cars can last hundreds of thousands of miles and 15 or 20 or 25 years. I think they are built so much better now than they used to be. I have two older cars, a 2013 and a 2014 model, and I plan on keeping them basically until they die. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue. So it's interesting to see that that we're going to see repair shops being a good place to work or own or at least survive during the COVID.
Yeah. Well, my question is how many people are possibly getting rid of a second family car too, or at some point realizing they're not going to need one, so maybe retiring one once it's ready to be done with, because a part of me would love to be able to get rid of one of our cars. I'm not sure that either would really help us out that much financially, getting rid of a vehicle right now.
Well, paying insurance is probably going to help you.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe even $1,000 a year.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have one that's paid off and then one that we pay for, a lease. And I thought about, should we try to sell the one that's paid off, because maybe we'll be doing this for a year. I mean, it's very possible. So
I'm fully ready now to stay here in my basement broadcasting for at least another 6 months, if not into early next year.
Yeah. And I figure my job, I leave most mornings to go out, but usually I'm back in time if my husband needed to use the car, but he doesn't really leave that often. So yeah, I think we may need to revisit that idea. And I wouldn't imagine. I know a lot of car manufacturers are giving some good deals right now. I think.
Yes, definitely. And I'm going to go look at my insurance rates right now, because I know they're actually pretty high. But I'm going to change my driving habits, because it asks you how many miles you drive and where you're driving to and from.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not really driving. I'm just basically going to the grocery store, over to Home Depot or wherever. And I'm not going to a work where I'm not traveling 50 miles a day like I was. So I wonder if I can adjust that in my policy, that my rates might go down. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope.
I'm sure it might not be a huge amount, but I think it is going to be something. Usually that is something they advise you to do when
because they've been refunding me over the last couple of months, like $25 for my what is it? It's like $600 or $1,200. I think I pay $1,200 a year for the car insurance on my two cars that are both paid off. But still, they're sending me $25. Thanks.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's helping so much. We're going to need a little more money for infrastructure, because a national transportation research nonprofit group called TRIP, TRIP, says our highway and roadway infrastructure must be improved, and they say it's really bad here in my home state of Colorado, saying the rate of congestion, travel volume, road and bridge deterioration, and facilities on Colorado's interstate system are among the highest in the nation. So I wanted to talk more about this problem, not just that's affecting us here in Colorado, but really all over the country, especially in the states that are really seeing a lot of growth. So I've invited Rocky Moretti. He's TRIP's Director of Policy and Research, to be here on the show. And TRIP was founded in 1971, nonprofit organization that researches, evaluates, and distributes economic and technical data on surface transportation issues. Rocky Moretti has been with TRIP since 1992, where he researches, writes, and edits numerous state and national reports. Rocky, welcome to the Driving You Crazy podcast.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today.
So overall, the country is seeing, obviously, a deterioration in the infrastructure. It doesn't take much looking around in any state in the nation to really see some infrastructure problems around the country. How bad are the roads and bridges we're driving on right now?
Congress wanted that question answered, and they went to the National Academy of Science and asked for a report on the interstate highway system, the most critical system in the nation. It carries around a quarter of the travel. Nearly 40% of all freight moves on the interstate system. The National Academy of Sciences came back last year and said that the interstate highway system has a persistent and growing problem in terms of reliability because of traffic congestion, and a 64-year-old system is just wearing out. and states are doing routine repairs because that's typically all they can afford. But the system's reaching the point where that's really reaching a point of diminishing returns. What's needed will be the reconstruction of major components of that system, bridges, major interchanges, not just a simple repaving, but actually pulling up those subsurfaces and redoing those interstates. As you would anticipate, that's not going to be cheap. That report found that the current investment, about $23 billion a year nationally, needs to be more than double. So that's where we stand. The interstate system is the backbone of our transportation system, but it's a backbone that's really starting to bend.
Yeah, and it seems that it's not bending as much in some states as it is in other states, and it seems like it's also bending and being more rigid depending on if you're on an interstate highway or a U.S. highway or a state highway. Are those, you think, equally as bad, or you think there are some states that are doing a better job of keeping maybe their infrastructure up compared to the overall federal highways?
If you look at simple data on road and bridge conditions, or even traffic fatality rates, those get worse once you leave the interstate system. The interstate system is a lot safer because of the design of the roadway, the limited access to vehicles, and so forth. And so you see greater safety, and most of the high levels of traffic fatalities are on the rural system and really on any roads once you're off the interstate system. Similarly with bridge conditions, you see bridge conditions are typically worse off the interstate system, and that's also true of pavements. What's different, of course, is the interstate system is the most heavily traveled system and most critical to not only mobility regionally, but also within urban areas. And so the challenge of rebuilding that system becomes even greater. If you look across the country, what you'll find is the problems break down to some extent regionally. In western states like Colorado, Utah, Arizona, a number of western states, growth is the huge challenge. In Colorado, as we pointed out in our report this week, the level of travel increase on the interstate system increased by 51%. At the same time, additional lane capacity on the interstate system in Colorado increased by 3%. So as you would expect, there's a lot more cars and trucks on the road. There's a lot more traffic congestion on Colorado's freeways, but we're seeing that particularly in high growth areas.
I want to get back to that point in just a second, but you were mentioning in your response about the difference between the U.S. highways and interstates, and the interstates are safer. Generally, they are because they're either generally divided by a specific concrete divider or maybe even cable rail. On U.S. highways or other rural highways, it could be just a double yellow line that's separating the oncoming traffic from each other. So I think that makes it inherently more dangerous off the interstate system than on it.
That's right. And what we've seen is that when you make the additional roadway safety design improvements, there's a good example out of Texas that systematically invested a lot of money in its rural system, just simple cost-effective strategies, adding rumble strips, paving some shoulders, improving the design of some intersections, and they saw fatalities drop dramatically on those rural systems. Now, we also know that we're not blaming the roads when people get killed. It's ultimately typically a poor decision or a mistake or an impaired driver. But when you make those additional roadway safety improvements, it tends to reduce the results of someone making a mistake. And so traffic safety is really a function of good enforcement, good public education, but then also having a roadway driving environment that's as safe as possible.
Now, according to TRIP's report from 2000 to 2018, vehicle travel on at least the Colorado interstates, it increased, and I think you mentioned part of this, at a rate of 17 times faster than the rate of which new lane capacity has been added. As a result, Colorado's interstates are now the third busiest and the 11th most congested in the United States. Obviously, these are pre-COVID numbers since COVID has happened, and we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit. Traffic patterns and obviously volume has changed dramatically. But do you think Trip is saying now that if Colorado invested in more travel lanes over that last 20 years or so, there would be less congestion? And if so, does that suggest we can build our way out of congestion?
Adding additional capacity, and typically when additional capacity is built into the system, it's along existing routes. Now, the National Academy of Sciences also pointed out that there were some places where there were essentially missing links in the system, which was designed largely in terms of the routes in the 1940s and 50s, and in the West is still playing catch-up because of obviously the significant growth. But to get back to your point, I think the challenge is to recognize that there is some additional capacity that's appropriate to add, but it's certainly not going to be at the same level or rate of travel growth, and that's partly due to the fact that the cost of that in some corridors it's not appropriate for a variety of reasons. So really, we're looking at using the system as efficiently as possible. Particularly in urban areas, there's a lot of things with ramp metering, with incident management. States are increasingly investing in making sure that when there's a breakdown or a crash, that it's dealt with as quickly as possible. In fact, the general approach by state and local transportation agencies increasingly is to take a holistic approach to look at the overall issue, from how are we dealing with crashes, how are we trying to use the system as efficiently as possible, and so you really, how are, in terms of traffic management strategies, informing the public of travel times. The challenge is to make the system as reliable as possible. So we're suggesting that adding some capacity along certain corridors is certainly going to be part of that, particularly in areas with high growth. But sometimes it can be very smaller incremental steps. I was in Boston several months ago, pre-COVID, a conference on traffic congestion. And, in urban Boston, it's unlikely that you can add capacity on some of those highways through very tightly packed urban areas. But there were a variety of small bottlenecks, intersections without turn lanes, a variety of things that could be addressed realistically to essentially address some of the gridlock in those regions. So it's really an approach that makes sense for each region. Certainly additional capacity is part of that, but oftentimes that capacity can be, really not, turn lanes or a variety of less impactful improvements that can go a long way to making the system more reliable.
You mentioned incident management. Here in Colorado, our Department of Transportation has been, for as long as I can remember, maybe 25 years, working, and they call it the Mile High Courtesy Patrol. And basically, there are a couple of tow trucks. They used to have them as independent contractors working for the state during the morning and afternoon commute. They would just roll up and down the interstates and help out disabled vehicles, give gas if they needed to, assist the police with blocking lanes, and then tow or move the cars if they were in a crash or just disabled off to the shoulder. So it would open up the lanes, and it was really it has been a program by the Department of Transportation that has been instrumental in keeping our highways better flowing in general than maybe in other parts of the country. And I think it's been a very successful program. And then you were also mentioning about the ramp meters. Well, and maybe you're not familiar with this, but I just posted a story a couple weeks ago about a program that our Department of Transportation is working on with a couple of companies out of Australia to do smart meter ramp usage, where they are actually going to monitor the amount of traffic flow on the mainline part of the interstate and then adjust the amount of traffic that can get onto the interstate and hold traffic back onto some of the feeder routes a little bit longer to get an overall trip acceleration through those main highways. So it's going to be an interesting test program that they're going to test over the next 6 months, and that should start here this fall.
And those are the types of approaches. It's not a simple set of solutions. It's a broader context. And what we haven't talked about, obviously, is funding. Transportation agencies across the country have a very good sense of what it takes to make a system more reliable. The challenge, obviously, is being able to fund it, and that's a challenge both at the state level and also federally. We see two opportunities in the short term that could have dramatic impacts on the transportation system in Colorado, but national.
Is that what got us to this point of poor infrastructure, poor roadways? Is it just the lack of money?
The National Academy of Sciences report to Congress said that it was a long-term lack of adequate investment that has led to the deterioration of the interstate highway system. But you can really look across the country. In Colorado, the latest estimates from the Department of Transportation is that they should be spending an additional $533 million annually to address the transportation projects they see that are critically needed. And then if you look at the current deliberations in Washington over a stimulus package, during COVID, it's been estimated that so far state transportation agencies have lost $16 billion in revenue because people are driving less, so paying less gas taxes, contributing less in toll fees. And the House stimulus package has addressed that to some extent. I think there was $13 billion in that package. And the estimate is that overall states will lose around $37 billion. So now we see the Senate also discussing that package. That's going to be critical because state transportation departments this year have already cut $9 billion in projects. If they don't get that money from the federal government, those are improvements in the safety of the system and the reliability of the system and just basic preservation that aren't going to happen. And then a very critical source of funding in Colorado, but across the country, is the Surface Transportation Program at the federal level. Well, that program expires at the end of September. The House has put forward a new bill that significantly would boost that funding, although the House bill also comes with a fair amount of red tape that candidly would tie the hands of state transportation agencies in determining which projects are the most critical in a region. And the Senate has had some initial discussions, but aren't at the point yet where they have moved forward with a comprehensive program. So the clock's ticking on the federal program, and state transportation agencies obviously have to be very conservative in their investments until they see how that plays out.
I'm speaking with Rocky Moretti. He's TRIP's Director of Policy and Research about the state of our roads and our infrastructure. Famously, the people of Colorado over the last several years have voted down 3 major times a tax increase or bond measure to fund transportation. And that's just here in Colorado. It's different in other states where I know in Utah they have passed legislation to raise their gas tax, and their roads seem to be much better than the roads here in Colorado. Now, is this a time, if we can't get the funding, obviously, in Colorado because the people don't want to vote for it, is it time to look at road usage fees, at registration fees? Is it time to shift how money is coming into these Department of Transportations with fewer people driving, as you mentioned, fewer people paying gas tax, and fewer dollars are coming into the states?
Well, we've put out reports in Colorado pointing out that when you don't make adequate investments, then there are certainly going to be costs related to that. So the bottom line is that when you're not able to adequately maintain the system, then you're going to see additional costs in terms of maintaining your vehicles. There's a cost involved in being stuck in traffic, and so you're losing time there. And then finally, there's also significant costs to traffic crashes. Our last report found that in Colorado, statewide, that cost is $8 billion annually to the public. And that is the cost of more road repairs to your vehicles, because the rougher the shaped roads are in, 2 things happen. Your vehicle obviously is getting beaten up driving on those roads that are in poor condition, but it also means your vehicle's wearing out more quickly. In terms of traffic fatalities and serious traffic crashes, we can't estimate the real cost of a traffic fatality, which is obviously the devastation to a family. But we can look at those economic costs, and that's well over $2 billion in Colorado annually. And then the estimate of a congestion cost is just looking at the value of time. This is based on research done annually by the Texas Transportation Institute. That's around $3 billion in Colorado. So, our message is that certainly improving the transportation system, making it more reliable, making it safer, and maintaining it takes an investment. There's no doubt about that. But there's also a significant cost in when you don't make those repairs.
Looking at some of the worst congested urban interstates on your list, California comes in at number 1. And surprisingly, at least to me, maybe Maryland number 2, maybe you're including Washington, D.C. in there, New Jersey at number 3, and Delaware at number 4. I could see Florida at number 5, Massachusetts with Boston at number 6, but Delaware at number 4 and Rhode Island at number 7, Connecticut at number 8. It seems interesting that some of the smallest states have some of the most urban congested interstates.
Well, I think what you're looking at there is the Northeast corridor between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And so in the case of Delaware and Rhode Island, right on those corridors, most of their, I-95 goes right through there. And that's another very important statistic that you're referencing, in addition to the share of urban interstates that are congested, is to actually look at travel per lane mile on urban interstates. Colorado ranks 3rd there. This is based on 2018 data, the latest data that's available, right behind California and Maryland. So it shows you just how heavily traveled those urban freeways in Colorado are.
Well, yeah, in the interstate volume increase, you have Nevada at number 1, Louisiana at number 2, then North Carolina, Utah, Colorado, and Texas, all very fast-growing states. We've talked a lot about how Las Vegas is growing pretty quickly, how Louisiana has come back after Katrina and growing quite quickly, and North Carolina obviously growing quite quickly as well. So some of those states, I think, have some interesting challenges when it comes to their transportation system and how congested their highways have become.
That's right. Trip put out a report last year looking at freight transportation in the country, and what became clear from that is the impact of Amazon and other organizations that have really changed the supply chain network, and then COVID has taken that to a whole higher level in terms of the demand for the movement of small products and moved quickly. What we're seeing is a tremendous increase in large trucks moving across the country. Now, again, during the pandemic, the nation's supply chain literally was our lifeline. Now, as we move through perhaps the mid-period of the pandemic and hopefully towards a resolution to some extent into the next year, I think we've seen some subtle long-term changes in our economy. I think they're all going to favor increased trucking. It seems that the public is starting to get back to travel levels similar to what we saw before COVID. So I think looking into the future, we have a very mature, aging transportation system, certainly the interstate system, and it really starts with a long-term, well-funded, reliably funded, very critically, federal program, and then also at the state level, ensuring that the state is making the investments that are necessary, and then also local governments as well. So I think really the thinking needs to be, as we get through this pandemic and we look into the future, what are some key building blocks of infrastructure? Obviously, the transportation system is a very vital part of that.
Well, and not to pick on the truckers, but I've understood from talking to some engineers at our Department of Transportation that one fully loaded truck can do as much wear and tear on the roads as about 9,000 passenger vehicles. Is there any talk about maybe addressing that issue, since we have increased the amount of trucks and deliveries that are on the roads, that the roads are going to be suffering because of that increased demand to ship goods and services across the country and locally.
Well, it certainly increases the need and the investment level that's required to maintain our roads, highways, and bridges with those larger volumes of freight. The report, again, based on a very thorough ongoing federal database, anticipates that the value of freight moved by trucks and really by all modes over the next 20 years is going to double. So we're going to be seeing more freight being shipped across the country. That's very critical to our quality of life, but we need to have the infrastructure in place that can support that level of mobility for freight movement.
Do you think they should be paying more than everybody else in their average car because they are contributing to more of the deterioration of the infrastructure?
Well, trucks, both through federal taxes, starting with the gas tax, and then also in states that have also weight fees, generally have shown a willingness to pay additionally for the system. You also see when they get onto a toll system that they have to pay additional funds as well. So, they are, and we've seen that the truckers organizations have shown a willingness to pay additional funds, recognizing that really their whole system requires a good transportation system.
Yes, and the trip report also does find some good news based on the relative safety of our interstate system, as we talked about earlier. And the report also says that the pavement smoothness on most segments of the U.S. interstate is, quote, acceptable, and saying the crumbling foundations of most highway segments needs to be reconstructed, and that continued resurfacing rather than addressing the underlying foundational issues provides diminishing returns and results in shorter periods of pavement smoothness. Now, does that suggest that we might need to just tear down the interstates to bare soil and then start again, build it over top of that?
Well, that was a recognition that increasing what states are doing, obviously, with limited resources, is trying to go in and resurface those systems. But what the engineers are finding is that resurfacing that used to last for maybe 5 years now no longer lasts as long, because what's happening is that almost like a repair on your house. You might get away with throwing up a few extra shingles when you have a leak, but if you're not dealing with what's underneath those shingles, eventually small repairs are not going to get the job done. And so that's what's starting to happen with the interstate system, is that states are recognizing they're going to have to make the far more significant investment of taking a highway that's been basically on top of a sub-base built in the 1950s and digging that system up and rebuilding it. And as you would anticipate, that's going to be a significant expense and a long-term expense. And so states are looking at additional ways to raise that funding. And then we're seeing a trend in urban areas to look at adding some additional lanes that are managed lanes, which essentially means that if there's going to be some additional highway capacity in some urban areas, adding a cost to it as a way to bring in additional revenue.
Colorado is, toll lane crazy. We have gone on the express lane bandwagon in a big way, and they're building them all around the Front Range between Fort Collins and Boulder and Denver, and going on down to Colorado Springs. Two final questions for you. How do you think COVID is going to change the data set for everything that you're looking into, because it has really changed how traffic patterns have changed and really have been shifted just because of our now post-COVID world? And how long do you think it might take before we are back into some kind of a pre-COVID level of traffic?
Sure. We saw obviously a tremendous decrease in travel, and we've been looking at the monthly numbers, and then there's also been organizations based on things, cell phone data, looking at that huge reduction. Now, in May, it began to come back. In most regions, it's travel volumes are back within 10 or 15% of pre-COVID. as we move into the fall, it seems that at some point it's going to move back, but it will probably be based on what's happening with the economy, and obviously that falls into what happens on the medical front, whether it's a vaccine or improved therapies, and obviously well outside my knowledge base. But we would, it seems likely that whether it's by next year or 2022, we're going to see travel back at the same level. And the country, I think, is poised for long-term significant economic growth. We know the country is going to add significant population over the next 20 or 30 years. And so I think those trends will continue. There may be subtle trends because of COVID in terms of how people choose to travel. Will there be more working at home? I think the reality is that what we'll see is some of the ongoing trends that were true before COVID may be accelerated somewhat post-pandemic. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see the demand for mobility across the country, not just for highways and cars, but really for all modes, continuing to increase into the future.
Yeah, I think it could be a while before we start to really see other modes of transportation, buses, motor coaches, the trains, obviously aircraft, to pick up as fast as driving across the country. When you're in a car by yourself or your quarantined family, if you will, I think people think that is and feel much safer doing that than they do jumping on an airplane, even if the Congress does pass some kind of legislation that keeps the middle seat open for an undetermined amount of time.
Certainly modes where people it's easier to control the environment, whether that's driving or even riding a bicycle or being a pedestrian, are going to be, the public are going to feel more confident in until we move ahead in addressing this pandemic.
Well, Rocky Moretti, thank you so much for your insight, your expertise on this. Rocky is the TRIPS Director of Policy and Research, and we were talking about the state of our roads and infrastructure. Thanks again for all your time and insight.
Thank you, Jason. I'd be glad to come back anytime.
All right. Thanks again, Rocky. Appreciate the information there. All it takes is a little bit of money, Nicole. All we need is a little money, and all of our highways, our bridges, everything, the infrastructure will just be perfect. All we need is just a little bit of money. Little bit. That's all it takes. Yeah. Everything just takes a little bit of money. By the way, I received a message from a PR person about a guest I was trying to book, and this PR guy asked if I was going to write an online version or this was going to appear online anywhere. And I said, well, maybe. Sometimes these interviews end up online or as online version. Sometimes the newsroom picks it up. Sometimes you pick it up or I do and right. Write something out of it. But he after I said, I can't promise anything that it's going to be there. It might just be sitting here in the podcast and out there for everybody to listen to. And he says, well, I guess the guest probably won't be able to make it. I'm like, really?
What?
Okay. Well then, the offer has been rescinded. I'll take it back if you can't join me because I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm dumping you. You can't dump me. Yeah.
Is this a local person?
No. And it's actually this. I think it was an outfit. It was a national, I think, New York PR guy, and I think this place that I was talking about was actually in Europe. And I have the ability to do phone interviews with WhatsApp. On my phone, and I could do a WhatsApp interview anywhere. And so if you're around the world, I can talk to you here on the program via WhatsApp. But if you don't want to be here on the program, well, then we don't want you either. I mean, we have a pretty good listener base right here, and I think that should be good enough for them. But I guess not.
I guess not. Maybe I don't know. I wonder what the reach of this is compared to our Denver 7 website.
Much more here.
Probably. Yeah, I bet it's close.
Denver 7 website.
Yeah.
I think anybody reads that. Everybody's on the Facebook or Twitter.
They read the headlines only.
Yeah, no, I get that all the time.
Scanning.
That happened to me when I wrote that story about the truck tires and the tires blowing out. All of a sudden people are getting, or anything I write about truckers, anything I do about man, I get blasted because all the people do is only read the headline, and then they think I'm saying that, and it's a viewer who's writing me a question, and I have to reply to these people. It's not me, it's this viewer, but still. Anyway. Back to square one with trying to find a guest maybe for next week. I'll figure something out. The things come around every so often. So
there's way better people than that guy.
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, get that guy out of here. Yeah. Seriously. Anyway, thanks again, Nicole, for filling in, and appreciate your time as always in your bedroom.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Now it's on to I got a Zoom interview here that I'll do from bed, and then maybe I'll just take a nap. This is a real. It's not.
So from podcast to interview to nap, and then to dinner, and then back to sleep again. All in. Are you gonna be fed there in your bed as well?
I probably could. I don't.
Oh, perfect.
This isn't probably where I'm most, creative, and I don't know.
Well, you just need to dress it up a little bit. Just dress it up a little bit, Nicole. All right. Well, anyway, thanks again for listening. Thanks for being here. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy.
And I'm Nicole Brady, working from a bedroom.
Be safe, and as always, happy motoring. Oh, that is so great.